Anthony, my friend, welcome
Yes,
back. You've been on a hiatus.
Yes, sir. Youth
Okay.
baseball will do that to you.
Youth baseball, a little bit of work, a little bit of wonky hours. Listeners, friends, folks who are tuning in, welcome aboard. Episode 57 of the Six Sports Podcast. Sergio here, Anthony with me, as I've already mentioned, at the top of the good old camera rolling. No Igor, no Joe tonight. No, believers or disbelievers or whatever you want to call them, because it's not going to be all Leaf talk tonight. Nope. Instead, I thought it'd be wise if we themed the episode tonight on the similarities in misery between the three main sports franchises here in Toronto, being the Toronto Raptors, the Toronto Blue Jays, and of course, the Toronto Maple Leafs, who we dedicated an entire episode to last week, and I blew up a couple times. About timeline, Anthony, timeline of ill-advised decisions, either being too soon or too late. And I chuckled earlier this week when you and I thought about, hey, what are we going to talk about tonight? And I chuckled about this idea because obviously it comes off of the heels of the Toronto Raptors having the sixth best odds in the lottery. And because that's how life has to work, they fall down. They fall out of the top six and into the eighth pick, which then, resulted in them passing that pick along to San Antonio, which was a part of the agreement in the Yaka-Pirtle trade that they stupidly made, not this past season, but the season before, when they were still trying to do something with the roster. Anyways, that's what I want to get into today. I don't want to necessarily get into the lottery, but it's kind of a high-level overview, which is a terminology that gets rained upon me a lot at work lately. High-level overviews, high-level conversations. So we're going to come from up here, bud. And we'll start with the Raptors.
Now, I might try and bring it back to a positive aspect too, right?
I love
so
when you try to be positive.
Yeah, so we're not just playing armchair quarterback for the entire podcast.
No, please.
Living in the real.
Find silver linings.
We will try and find the silver lining so not everyone jumps off the CN Tower. With one of their favorite team's jerseys on.
With one of their favorite team's jerseys on. I envision right now, and I may try to make this picture for YouTube, because you know how you get to make pictures so that when people click onto the videos, they kind of see the still image. I imagine in my head that the still image that I'm going to use is the three Spider-Mans, okay, pointing at each other. And it's going to be the Raptors, the Leafs, and the Jays logo on their faces. Let's start with the Toronto Raptors, because at one time, not too long ago, they were the darlings of this city. Sure. That management group could do no wrong. You got it. And it involved making a decision at a time where great. And I love how you take off the headphones and everything, so I get all that feedback and fantastic ruffling and rustling.
This is
That's
bringing
great.
It back to the positive.
Yeah, bring it back to the positive. You can hold it there, because forever what that'll be is at least they got one, right? And we'd love to say, now the Jays obviously have two, but in more recent times, you'd love to say, hey, could they get one? And the Leafs, as we say all the time, just give me one before I die.
I'll just preface where you're going with all of this with the sense of, I have never loved a team more. There is no team that I love more, who I also thought in my lifetime would never even get one.
Yeah. But that's why they were the darlings, right?
Correct.
Because they had the management team, who, by the way, is still in existence, still employed. But they had the management team that prior to that 2019 season looked at a roster, a run of reasonable playoff success, but not being able to get over the hump, known as LeBron James. And they needed to make a decision. And the decision at that time did not solely just lie on getting rid of the coach, which they did at the time, Dwayne Casey, but also what do we do with the core? And the core was DeMar and Kyle, predominantly. And I get it. Things had to line up perfectly in that particular offseason for the Raptors because maybe Masai and Bobby had the appetite to do something. Mm-hmm. But if nothing presented itself, you likely would have come back with the same core, the odd tweak, and just Nick Nurse as the coach, right? But an opportunity presented itself in Kawhi. He took a swing, and the rest, they say, is history. But what's happened in the years after that, the year after the championship, after Kawhi left, the bubble and all of that stuff, is, for me at least, a management team that lost a little bit of touch with being able to deviate from a plan that wasn't working. And the season after the original COVID playoff bubble, the one which saw Toronto play the entire season in Florida, miserable, but landed them Scotty Barnes, inarguably, in my opinion, was an opportunity to reset the franchise. And they didn't do it. Now, you and I have talked about, on this very podcast, we talked about, hey, you're not in the room with Masai, Bobby, and the board, right? There was a lot of money lost in COVID. You have no idea if the board looked at Masai and said, not yet, brother. You go and play. You give people a reason to try to show up to the games because we need to recollect some lost revenue. You try to make the playoffs because we'll take a home game. We'll take 2. We'll take whatever we can get at this point.
Right.
Now, we don't know that was the message, but we floated around the idea that maybe...
And they did, right? They got 3 home games against Philly.
They did. But the subsequent season, after that, I don't want to call it a flame out, but you could clearly see that the construction of the roster as it was, with Siakam being the top guy, with OG, even though he was, even though still young. I mean, he's young today. It needed something else, right? And we've rumored maybe, is it the emergence of Barnes as he gets older? But in the subsequent season, the opportunity presented itself as these guys were coming towards contract extensions.
So just so we get our timeline straight, you're saying they lose to Chicago in the play-in. That's when they should not. So they make a Pirtle trade. They lose to Chicago in the play-in.
You got it.
And that's when, okay, let's blow this up. But they had already made a trade for Pirtle.
They had already made the trade for Pirtle. And that was the mistake. That was the deadline in which the rumors were coming out. Is Toronto going to be the heavy seller? Are they going to look for somewhere to move Van Vliet? Are they going to look for somewhere to move Anunoby? Are they going to look for somewhere to move Siakam? Might they move all 3? Like, is Toronto going to go on the complete sell-off? And instead, they do none and trade a first to go get Jakob Poeltl to try to make the playoffs, which they got into play-in and didn't go anywhere. So, long story short, where we had given credit, like I said, just a few short years before, you were ready to build the statue for Masai Ujiri. And this management group has taken that taste out of the mouth of this fan base because apparently what it looks like is they fumbled an opportunity to truly reset this franchise. Do you feel the same way about that?
Yes. Yeah, so I don't disagree. I just if this is going to be like we can go back and forth between Leafs, Raptors, Jays, right? You know,
This is your life, Toronto.
the difference is what you have with the Raptors that you don't have with the other group, right? Is you had that complementary core that had actually accomplished something. I know
Correct.
OG missed a lot of like most of that season with Kawhi because of injuries and things like
Yep.
that. But
Yep.
even the season with OG in the bubble, I will not be told by anyone that they don't win game 7 if that game isn't in Toronto rather than in a bubble in Orlando, Florida. Right? So they are still a competitive team. So the guilt for the Raptors comes from a loyalty to the guys who were able to contribute to a parade.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's some real loyalty there. I mean, the Masai is crying at the press conference this year when he announces a trade for Pascal Siakam.
Yeah.
Now, he's a businessman. He let his heart get in his way. He let his emotions, he let his loyalty, he let 2019 blur
Yeah.
his vision.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, right? And you talked about it too. Like it's not just Masai and Bobby, or it's not just, you know, for the Leafs, it wasn't just Kyle, or it's not just Ross and Mark. It's Rogers and Bell and Larry, and we're talking franchise values, right? So the Raptors side is extreme loyalty, you know, and unwilling to really see what was in front of you. And it
Yeah.
wasn't that the team isn't good enough. It was what wasn't able to see was an opportunity. So with all of that, you know, how when Fred VanVleet though walks away in free agency, you
Right.
don't start going hard for trades on Pascal and OG then, I don't
Right.
understand. That for me is where things really kind of fell off, right? You might not be happy with your trade package for Pascal. How much more could you have gotten down the road, or how much more could you have gotten earlier on, you
Yeah.
know, with more years on his current contract?
Yeah. I think
I
that's
don't know.
probably the
I
more
don't know.
important point.
But
Right.
it's the Fred VanVleet one that gets me.
Well, you got nothing.
Because, you know, you're talking about that infamous, you know, he's all stitched up, he's hitting threes, he's guarding Steph Curry. I get it why we all loved him. I
Yeah.
get it. You know, he bet on himself. It was a team that bet on themselves.
Yeah.
It was a team that bet on themselves.
Yeah.
So then why isn't he here? Right? Or why did you not let him? Why did you trade him? Or why did you not trade him and get something in return? Instead, you got completely blindsided that Houston overpaid for him.
Bl-
We're willing to, overpay. And you know,
but
hey, Freddie, how'd that
blindsided.
work? How'd
Right.
that work? Because Houston
But
didn't even make the plan. But from our perspective, we are left, you know, with nothing in our hands. And that was the one that, oh my God, is Fred really going to Houston? Yeah. Okay. Get on the phone and let's start gauging interest. That should have signaled a rebuild. That should have signaled the leaving of Fred VanVleet should have signaled a rebuild, and
yeah.
that's the failure.
Yeah.
I don't fail them for the fact of what they got for Pascal after. I don't fail them for what they got for OG after. I fail them for letting Fred VanVleet walk away for nothing. That's the true failure there.
Well, you were one season late on all of it, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the OG trade on paper doesn't look bad. Um, I mean, these are two players that are now a part of a core here for the Raptors. Speaking of Quickly and RJ Barrett, two guys that are going to be paired up with Scotty Barnes going forward. What sucks about the process is, could you have gotten more? What did more look like? What did the different trades look like? That likely would have been on the table one season sooner. You know, was it all draft picks? Was it a combination of other young players? These things are all unknown.
No, and remember too, when you make a trade, you got to get bodies back, right? Because salaries have to match,
Yeah, no, of
right?
course.
So they're
Of
looking
course.
for, like, they weren't looking for anybody probably on a max deal who was older than Pascal, right? So like I get that part. You're trying to build, you're trying to fit the age. But again, tonight's theme is what? Basically poor timing by Toronto sports franchises, right?
Poor
Missed
timing, and it
opportunities.
doesn't matter
And
either
and
too
for
late or
me,
too early.
yeah,
It's all, you know.
yeah. And
It's
for
just
me,
it's
like
just
I
poor
said,
timing.
Fred, breaking news: Fred VanVleet signs with the Houston Rockets. Right? Dot dot dot. Toronto is accepting trade offers for both OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam.
Right. Right.
That's what it is to me, because the loyalty and the admiration and the respect and all of that still existed, because those guys were core members of a championship team. As soon as Fred walks, then it's over.
Right. These decisions, when they happen, don't only affect the team in the immediate. They can affect an entire timeline. And that's the point. That's really the high level point that I want to get to here. The decision that this front office for the Toronto Raptors ultimately made to hold on to these guys, what ultimately became maybe one season too soon, and to also double down on that and trade a first round pick for Jakob Poeltl. Despite what you think of the quality of the draft this year in the NBA, put that aside. But by doing that, you have affected the future timeline for this team, possibly for years. Maybe, and again, much to what you said, salaries have to match in trades, and I get it. So you're not just trading OG Anunoby for 5 first-round picks. And I'm just throwing out, I'm not saying that would have been the return. But you're not just doing that. There's bodies that you have to get back. But in that, perhaps the team that you're looking at and the bodies that you get back are only 1-year contracts or 2-year contracts. They are, you're not necessarily taking back a player who's on a 4-year deal that's going to affect your timeline, right? You're taking someone who inevitably is going to get off the book with the commitment that they didn't have at that time to retool, rebuild, whatever vernacular you want to use, right?
But to their credit, though, a trade for RJ and IQ for Anunoby,
yeah,
is
okay
a
on paper.
Salvageable trade. It's very salvageable, right?
It's
and I'm not
salvageable.
it's like, so this makes sense when you look at the age. These guys are all within the same age timeline to Scotty Barnes.
Right. But so now I tell you, that's where you ended up. So you ended up with Barrett. You ended up with Quickly. You've got Scotty going into year 4. The loss of 1 pick in this draft, which would have been a top 10 pick. And again, I reiterate, despite what you think of the quality of this draft, they've lost a top 10 pick.
Despite what you think of the quality of the draft, you thought, not you, Raptors thought they were giving away a pick in the high teens.
Yes.
Right? They didn't think they were giving a top 10 pick away.
Yeah. Well, they didn't.
Right.
But
and they did. And that's what happened.
That's where it ended up.
Yeah.
And it also ended up there because as the injuries came in, because the team hadn't found enough success yet in this season, you could see that they committed to the tank, right? Scotty goes out. You know he's going to be out for the rest of the season. Then you've got these little nicky-knack injuries with Quickly, RJ Barrett consistently. So they didn't force the appetite to get these guys into the lineup.
No, Poeltl broke a finger, and he's been out for the whole year. And I will say, in Poeltl's defense, they're horrible with him not in the lineup.
Yeah, but I get that, and I understand that. So, but then they take advantage of the fact that things had gone wrong. Let's go into the tank. Let's see if we can get the top pick. Basketball gods don't work that way. But again, you do that a season late. Because again, this draft isn't highly regarded, but the one last year had arguably a generational talent in it.
Correct.
Right? With Wemby.
Yep.
And I'm not suggesting that the Raptors were going to win the lottery, but God, if there was ever a time that you were going to do
odds, for sure. Yeah.
You do it then. And again, they didn't, right? They didn't sell off at this all ties into the timeline. They didn't sell off at the deadline. They went out and decided to acquire Poeltl instead. And here we are. You know, instead of improving your odds at trying to get that guy, you didn't do it. You go one more season holding everyone on for too long. You lose Fred VanVleet for nothing. I mean, say what you want of the Siakam trade. Only the OG Anunoby trade, much to what you said, is the one that seems to be salvageable at least in the way that it looks. And now these guys are part of the future. But I ask you now, with this information, not knowing what they're necessarily going to look to do this offseason, but going forward with Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, and Quickly as your main three on this roster, do you look at that three-headed monster, which I'm really using that term loosely, but do you look at that three-headed monster and say, oh yeah, with the right additions, that's a team that's going to compete? Yeah.
I think it's a team that can compete for what I think is probably somewhere in that 7 to 10 spot right now.
Right.
Right. So you need more internal development. You need to make one more, or you need to make a couple big moves. Right. So you're not going to hit on a draft pick this year, in my opinion, but you need to hit on a trade, another trade that really works. But yes, so like the point of that for me is also, and again, if we tie this into other teams, you acquired a guy in Emmanuel Quickly who needs a contract.
Yep.
Right. So what are you looking at? Right. With what, footage, evidence, track record, but he's going to get $25 million this year, probably from the
likely
Raptors
somewhere
as an
in that
RFA,
range,
right?
Yeah.
And you also need to extend Scotty Barnes.
Mm.
So let's keep this all tied into the Jays haven't done this because Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. are without contracts long term, but they've had at least regular season success. They've qualified for the postseason. The Raptors are going into a position where, whether you like it or not, those three guys are on the poster, right? Right? You could throw in Grady Dick if you'd like, but we all know that there's still a timeline there, right? There's going to be so many more ups and downs. You have an unproven group of three guys. We don't know, right? The footprint isn't there that shows how long, or it's not very long. The track record's not there. Can these guys work together?
Yeah.
I think they can. I think it'll be fine. But before they've actually done anything, two of them need new contracts.
Yeah.
Sound familiar?
Sound
familiar?
Yeah.
Sound familiar, Leaf fans?
Right? Sound familiar.
And are they going to take like pay cuts and, shit, is there a scale where they'll earn a little less money?
There is no pay cut in the NBA.
No, there is no, right?
No, sir.
It's 12 guys.
Yeah.
8 of them make $20 million.
Yeah.
Right. So are we going to find out that because of Barnes and Quickly's contracts, the Raptors are now hamstrung with what they can do down the road? I don't know. I haven't done a deep dive into their capology.
Yeah.
Right. But does that not sound familiar?
Yeah.
Right.
Again,
we're going to be watching a lot of guys who got paid before they actually really did something substantial.
Yeah, you're taking a body of work from those two players in your assessment that comes from time that they were not with your team.
Right.
It comes from assessing body of work with both of them that came in their time in New York, which obviously wasn't good enough.
Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby were at least, maybe not Fred. Fred may have gotten an extension. Fred may have gotten a slight extent, like a, kind of like one, because he was undrafted, so he becomes a free agent sooner. So he probably got something coming out of his. But Pascal and OG, when they won the championship, were on their rookie contracts.
They were. Yep.
Right.
And I think Fred was a little bit higher, but
again, we'll bring it back if you want to get into the Leafs a little bit. What was accomplished at a high level? Like how many guys are winning championships while they're still on their rookie deals?
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
and then getting paid based on success.
Well, none, because
mostly none. Yeah.
Well, but you didn't have a team that was established where these rookies were coming into. These are high-level rookies because your team was in the gutter for a few years, and that's how you're getting them. Now, as they come together, listen, other teams don't necessarily have success with their best players on entry level. For Colorado, it came after. I mean, specifically with McKinnon and the Landeskog's and the stuff like that. It came after. They had received extensions already. Not to the same level that the Leaf guys received extensions.
But at least say with Chicago, you had the narrative, how are we going to pay all these guys after they just won a cup?
Well,
that's the difference, right? How are we going to pay all these guys after they just won a
Well,
cup.
that's the difference, right? And we've talked about this many times. All the Leaf guys took as much money as they could get. There was no thought or no process about leaving money on the table. But again, when we talk about timelines and narratives, and that's what last week's episode was all about, the Shanahan narrative and the Shanahan timeline and his screw up in either making decisions too quick or too late, it all goes back to that wonderful offseason where all of these contracts could have been renewed. And instead of having an experienced general manager doing the renewing, he removes him and hands the keys to the rookie. And that in and of itself screwed up the timeline for the Leafs. Because, as we said last week, the Nylander camp took Dubas to task on that contract negotiation. Now, hindsight being 2020, the Leafs win the negotiation. Only after the fact, you've got to look back on the contract and say, yeah, well, Nylander's last 2.5, 3 years outplayed that of a $7 million player in terms of regular season statistics. It doesn't always, that doesn't always matter. But that's for the most part what these contracts get predicated on. But because of that and sitting out and going until December, Dubas doesn't do the Marner renewal. He doesn't do the Matthews renewal. And that waits a year. And those guys have really good seasons, regular seasons. And what does it do? It just drives up the number. And again,
So
hey,
from a
go ahead.
Sorry. No, okay. So from a Raptors perspective,
yeah,
as much as we might not like the current course or path the team is on, should we give them a little bit of credit for the fact that they did not give Pascal Siakam $250 million?
No, because the answer at
Would
the
you
end
have
of the
felt
day
better
was
had
to
they
move on
extended him?
from the core. No. Would I have felt better? I mean, had you extended him with the idea that you're eventually going to trade him, then I would have been okay with that. But there needed to be an admission that this team as constructed, the way that they had it, was not going to work. And this front office waited too long to admit that.
Right. And so what team are we talking about right now?
I know. They all blend.
And we talk about that a lot in the playoff. We talk about that a lot on this podcast, right? There's a lot of that going on. We bring in a lot of similarities between all three teams. And at their core, right, this is what's wrong with the three major franchises in this city. Your best players who were identified as being the core have proven at some point it's not good enough.
You know who gets a pass, though? And I'm not talking about management. I'm talking about the best players. The guys who get a pass. Matthews. No, the guys who get a pass are on the baseball team. They get a pass because the one thing that we've established in the differences between these three sports is that on the baseball team, your best players can be hitting the lights out of the ball. But if you're down a run and 7, 8, and 9 are coming up, your best player can't affect the game. There's nothing that the manager can do to get them in. Do you know what I'm saying?
Your best players aren't hitting the crap out of the
ball. Well, they're not hitting the crap out of the ball, Ant, but you know what?
The generational talent that was Vladimir Guerrero Jr. might not hit 20 home runs this year.
Well, hold on a second. Yeah, but at least right now, okay, the exit velocity is 110. I get they're all base hits, but he's at least smashing the ball and Bo's waking up. But the issue with the Jays timeline, see, the one funny part is the Leafs, okay, were too quick to pull the trigger on Lou, and then everything that's happened in the 7 years after that is being too late on every other decision. And still up in the air because we don't know that they're trading a core player this year. That's yet to be done. All right. Because I'm still not convinced that they have the guts to do it. With the Raptors, again, it's being too late on making a move. With the Jays, uniquely enough, their mismanagement appears to have come by being too early on a thought process. And the too early on the thought process is, oh my God, our team that was up 9-1 or whatever the hell it was in a game 2 against Seattle in a wild card series blows the game because of defense, right? Blows the game because a bullpen can't come in and close it. So now we're going to overreact, which is what they did. And a lot of us bought into it too. So when the fans are screaming for something, it's usually an indication maybe you don't. Maybe you don't.
I'm sure. I'll be hard on I'll be completely honest. I'm sure at some point I used the phrase, "This team needs a culture change."
That needs a culture change, right?
And like, I'm not gonna lie. I hated the home run jacket. I hated the
I
hated the lack of baseball IQ.
Yeah, well, I wish
the poor base running, the outfield play was horrible.
Okay.
Right?
But they overreacted.
This is where we are. Yeah, this is where we are now.
Yeah. And when you overreact, as they did, they pulled the rug, if you will, out on a team that at any given time, when you think of that 2022 Jays team, at any given time, they could put up 5-6 runs in an inning. Like, that's it. Oh, the Jays are down 5-1 in the fourth. You're not changing the channel in 2022.
Right.
Now, you're like, oh, Jays are down 5-1 in the fourth. It's done. It's over. And it was an overcorrection by this front office.
It was an overcorrection, and then it was a double down.
Well,
because we had one of the most frustrating seasons of 2023. We were going home going, holy smokes, it's soccer.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There are no goals. There are no runs, right?
Yeah.
And they double down. They double down. Like, I'm sorry, I know he likes it here and he's a good guy and things like that, but yeah, when you double down by bringing back Kiermaier, that for me signaled more of the same.
Yeah. It signaled that we believe in analytics to the fullest extent, and those analytics are going to produce on the field at the plate, because what happened the season before was
they had the chance to correct their mistakes by saying, hey, listen, I think you guys went a little bit too far on this culture change. Lourdes and Teoscar are both free agents. You want to take a crack at bringing one of them back?
Well, one of them signed a 1-year deal in
with
LA.
Deferred money. And I just looked it up right now. He's batting .243. Not great. But how would 11 home runs and 36 RBIs look on this team?
11 and 36.
How would that look? Right?
It would look mighty tasty.
And I'm not going to harp on the guys that they did try to build around with Vladdy and Bo. They did try to build around. That's how they bring in a George Springer and things like that. Mm-hmm. But are you telling me that Varsho in center field and an 11 and 36 left fielder batting .240 doesn't help this team? Please.
Yeah, I would have taken it.
Please.
Would have taken it.
Right? It's not even a stupid contract. It wasn't even a stupid contract. And you doubled down on this.
Yeah.
And that signing makes the Turner signing more important. That signing makes the IKF signing more understandable, right? Where at the very least we're going to replace defense and stuff. So again, with the Jays, I'm starting to believe that their core, but it's unfair to say that the core of the Toronto Blue Jays is Vladimir Guerrero and Bo Bichette, because it's also Kevin Gausman and Jose Barrios.
Yeah, but it goes beyond that. Listen, Ant, look at the teams that are near the top of the standings right now. It's not just two guys hitting.
Sure.
It can't be. Okay, I mean, maybe with Cleveland. That's a joke. But it can't just...
The greatest Blue Jay who never wore a Blue Jay uniform, and Jose Ramirez is not having a great year right now.
He's not. But it's other Indians that are hitting. There is no one in the playoff pitch. It's the Guardians. Oh, jeez, that's a cancel culture. It's over.
And it's a kid from Mississauga.
He said Indians.
And it's a kid from Mississauga, and Josh Naylor.
Yeah. There is no one currently in a playoff position in baseball with a negative run differential. And I make a point to mention that because the Jays, as I'm looking, are at a negative 47. Okay. They've given up 47 more runs than they've scored. Not a surprise because, like I said, if you follow the team, you've likely, looked at your phone and said, another 2-1 game. Oh, another 2-1 game. Oh, 3-2. This is a recording.
And we can twist and turn. You go into it, right? What team in the playoffs in the first round lost because they lost the special teams battle, meaning they gave up more shorthanded goals and scored fewer power play goals.
Right.
Guess what, guys? The Leafs did, right? Like at their key, right? Like it's a combination of identifying a core that isn't as successful as you thought it would be. It's also, though, too, another thing we could maybe discuss a little bit of is if you're going to allocate this money, this top end money, right, so early on, you need to have an undercurrent of cheap talent coming through your system.
Right.
Almost nothing. Right?
Not in that timeline.
Right? No, and we go to the Blue Jays now. What are we waiting for? Oh, they missed out on Shohei. Okay, well, we don't really want Bellinger, and Bellinger doesn't want to come here. Now Bellinger, with all due respect, you call Scott Boras and you say, "I'll give you that 11 and 220 because we got to do something on this team." And even if I regret it in 5 years, who gives a shit? Because I'll be gone anyways.
Oh, I didn't even think they didn't even.
Cody's on a flight. Cody is on a plane.
They didn't need to even. Right? They didn't even need to give 11, Ant.
No,
had they gone 7,
7 and 140 gets it done, considering what all those guys signed for.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But
absolutely.
Where are the prospects? Where are the younger guys?
Well,
right,
so
that come through, like
But here's the thing, right? When you talk about that on the Jays, Addison Barger was having a good season in AAA. They called him up for a cup of coffee, right? Orelvis Martinez is tearing the cover off the ball in AAA. There seems to be somewhat of a funky fear on this Jays team to give at-bats, to give runway to your kids. Because you're right. If these guys come up, maybe one of them establishes themselves as an everyday hitter. They gave 15 minutes to Davis Schneider last year, and he came out of the woodworks. Was never a name on any of our lists, right? You look at it. You look at his minor league stats.
No, he's a career minor leaguer. He's a He's a career minor leaguer.
Bit of a journeyman.
He's 26 years old or whatever it is, right?
Here he is.
You don't usually count on that. Those
comes
are
prospects. Comes up last year, okay, and is part of the only month that the Jays offense was alive last year. It saved their season.
Correct.
It saved their season.
The Schneider, Horowitz, Clement, little trio. That saved
their season last year.
Yep.
And they're here again this year. Now, you're not gonna hear me sing the praises of Ernie Clement. On a team that's competing for a World Series, should probably be a bench player. But Davis Schneider, he's earned every day at bats for this team.
Mm-hmm.
He's got an eye. That's a guy that over the course of an entire season looks like he's going to give you a 274 average with an on base that's 100 points higher. I mean, what more can you ask for? Probably going to hit you 20, maybe a few more home runs, depending if he gets hot. Which I always chuckle at because he looks like he's 5'1" on TV. So you wonder where the power comes from. And it was an unexpected piece for them. But you've also got guys in the minors that are also hitting well, but you're going to continue giving at-bats to IKF, or you're going to continue giving at-bats to Kevin Biggio. Why? At this point, what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose if they were to bring up Orelvis Martinez tomorrow?
Because the analytics tell them that some of those numbers that they're getting, some of that production that they're getting down in the minors is flawed.
Wow.
That's what it is, right?
So, but that's it.
Right?
So let's just
Right?
live and
It's not
die.
against quality pitching. It's against, AAA pitching. That pitch was a horrible pitch. He won't see that in the majors. Blah 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 blah. What
If
did I hear
you,
today? I heard a stat today. The Jays are like fourth in batting average, but 29th with batting average with runners in scoring position.
yeah,
27th,
yeah,
something like that.
yeah, because
Yeah.
when it matters, they
Right.
can't get a hit, which was part of the problem last year. And I reiterate,
And what do we always say baseball is? Pitching, defense. Okay, check,
yeah,
check, and in my
timely hitting,
opinion, timely hitting. That's always
timely
been the
hitting.
word. All those all those Toronto guys who will tell you to, like, I grew up with guys like Fred McGriff and things like that, all these great hitters who we always said, but they're not clutch. And it was like, and I don't want to go after guys, but like the Mike Wilners of the world who say batting average with runners in scoring position doesn't mean a thing. You're not trying any harder to get a hit with the runners in scoring position. Oh, I believe you should be.
You
I
should
believe
be.
you should, because I think that pitcher is changing his game plan now to make sure that you don't advance a runner, that you don't score
Yeah,
that run. So
yeah.
it changes your approach.
It
But
was absolutely should.
let me ask you this though.
Mm-hmm.
In the world of we're going to rip the Jays, the Leafs, and the Raptors for their inability to do things under a proper timeline.
Right.
What is the timeline now for the Jays? Like, what do you want to see happen?
Well,
Because they have not extended Bo and Vladdy. So
yeah.
is time running out to sign them, or is time running out to trade them?
So I think first and foremost, again, and part of this falls on ownership to a degree, I guess. But, Rogers has committed an unbelievable amount of money to the annual salary for this team. Like you and I have chuckled about this before. I did not think
$230 million payroll.
230 million, 240 actually, I think is where it's closer.
It's a top 10 payroll, guys. What do you guys want?
I mean,
in Canadian dollars, in American dollars, and getting back Canadian, like, come on.
Never, ever, ever, ever would I have believed that the Jays would have ever eclipsed a $200 million payroll. Like it just, no way, Jose. Like it just, like it wasn't going to happen. And it has, and almost quietly. And I look at the roster and I'm like, how the hell did this roster get to $240 million? What's on here that's even worth that? But having said that, when you talk about it, and what do you do to extend this timeline now for the Jays, or open the window, or just close it all together and figure out what's next? That begs the question. But the bigger question for me is, do I trust who's in charge to make those decisions? I think what you need more than anything right now is an exit strategy from this general manager and this coach. And that might be a difficult decision for Shapiro. I don't know why it would be. It's the only general manager he's had in his entire tenure as president, because I am going to exclude the 5 minutes that he got here in the 2015 season when Alex Anthopoulos was still in the chair. That's not me advocating for Anthopoulos to stay. What I'm simply saying is it was Anthopoulos leaving, Ross Atkins coming. Ross Atkins has held the chair now for 8 years. That's not a standard thing in sports,
right,
to have your job last that long, especially when it hasn't yielded results. Now with Ross, he gets a little forgiveness at the beginning because we all knew that the teardown was going to come at some point. It was an aged Jays roster already when they went on that run in 2015. So you knew that a rebuild had to come at some point to open the door for the Bichettes and the Vladdies to step in.
No, he should be fired based on how the 2023 season played out.
Yes.
His reaction to the 2022
Yes.
season. So he should be fired for 2023 and his doubling down in 2024 if it doesn't get better fast.
So,
right?
but
so you're that's it.
Someone made a comment the other day. There was a pundit, and I forget if it was on TSN radio or 590. But someone on there said, well, you can probably look to make a change with the manager now and see if it does something. But removing the general manager in season does nothing, because what can the GM do? The GM doesn't hit. And in most cases, Ant, I'd agree with that. What's removing the GM now? Just wait till the end of the season. But in this case, on this team and the way that they operate, I feel that you have to, because it's become crystal clear that the decisions that are made, even the daily ones that go into each game, are not decisions that are solely made by the manager.
Which is why I don't condone a firing of John Schneider.
No, but this is why you have to fire everyone.
Yeah, you can if you want.
But you have to fire everyone.
Yeah. Right.
Because Atkins and his members under his team are all a part of those decisions.
Right. Yeah, as long as that bullpen phone is connected to not just the bullpen, but to an office upstairs.
Yeah.
Right? Get rid of it.
They are running things with a computer right now. Like, that's it. And that's not me trying to be facetious, sound like a smart ass. No, they're running things with the computer right now. They are constantly staring and analyzing data and taking that and trying to put it into the game. They doubled down on absolutely everything from last year, including keeping the general manager, including keeping the coaching staff, even going one step further and saying, we're going to take Donnie and we're going to make him the offensive coordinator. Because as if Don didn't have an opinion last year, it's suddenly raising his title was going to create this massive change in the hitting philosophy. Bullshit. That's fine. We can see that. It hasn't changed a damn thing. So you have to clean house, but you have to clean house now. You cannot wait. Because what you're doing, forget about it, not only are you pissing away this season, okay, because clearly that's happening, but you're pissing away much to what you said, time in contracts, how those players want to view your organization. You think that Bo Bichette's waking up every morning today saying, can't wait to re-sign here. I was the one advocate that said, no, they'll get Bo Bichette done. But if this is what you keep giving your supposed core of this team, I mean, I'd be saying, get me the fuck out of here. That's what I'd be saying if I was Bo. I'd probably be saying the same thing if I was Vladdy.
Right now,
that's really frustrating.
Right now, the Jays are 4.5 games behind the final wild card spot, which is held by Minnesota.
Yeah.
Right, but the issue is you could say that, but when you look at the standings, they would also need to jump over Boston, Texas, Tampa, and Detroit. Right?
4 teams.
That's not easy to do, and this is a team that has not won consecutive games since who knows how the hell long.
Yeah.
Right?
Can't string them together.
You can't win 2 in a row. You can't win a series. They haven't won a series. It's been a while. They had a good little run there, right, where they won after they. Yeah. So I mean, guys, like, how much longer are you going to put us through this? Right? And they've got us a TV station that waves the flag every day, and the numbers are still probably good. The attendance is actually better than I thought.
What is the TV station supposed to do, Ant? I mean, that's your property.
I get it.
They need to sell their product.
But what are you selling? You know, it's getting dreary out there, eh?
You're selling a day at the ballpark.
Yeah. Right?
That's what you're selling. You're selling a day at the ballpark. I mean, I still have tickets for the rest of the season. I still have probably half a dozen, if not a little, maybe more than that, more than half a dozen games that I still have to attend. It's frustrating. And that frustration, again, it carries across all 3 teams. You want to laugh at something? It's pick a date. Does not matter. Pick the month and the date. It's 2019. Okay? They're going in to what would be their championship season. The Leafs and the Jays are what they are. The Jays are finishing the retool.
Mm-hmm.
Vladdy and Bo are coming. And the Leafs are the Leafs still. You haven't completely soured on them. This city, you're looking at it and saying, it's there. You can feel it in the city of Toronto. Multiple championships are coming. Across all sports. You felt it. Felt it.
Yeah. Hey, Raptors win the championship June of 2019. In October, that basketball that was that game held ball or whatever it was actually given to Austin Matthews in the change room and in the dressing room after a game, and everyone is saying it's our time.
It's our time.
I wasn't saying, oh, these guys are wrong. I'll tell you right now, there's no chance. Everybody bought in. But
everybody. And
if
then
you
get to that, and then you get to that winter of 2019, and the Jays go out and they bring in Hinjin Ryu. No,
right.
it's the Hinjin Ryu year.
Yeah.
And it gets to 2020, which is slightly delayed the season because of COVID. So remember, it was a 60-game season, and the Jays make an extended playoff, right? But Vladdy's in the lineup, and Bo's in the lineup, and Alejandro Kirk is coming up and getting a hit. And you're looking at that entire time period saying, holy crap, like, it's here. And it just dissipates within 3 years. Within 3 years, that's it.
So,
wow, man, wow!
Because we're going on 50 minutes here. Let me just. Yeah. I'm not saying we necessarily need to wrap up, but question. So, Toronto teams have two things in common. They've made mistakes establishing the core of the team. They've made mistakes with the timing of how to build around that core, or yet choose a new core. Correct. So, you've got 3 moves. You've got 1 move for each team. Am I safe to assume that what you want to see from a Leaf perspective is the trading of Mitch Marner?
Yeah, but, I have to preface saying that because if someone's listening to us for the very first time, okay, or they've only heard us a couple times, we're on YouTube now, Ant. We're getting some views, okay?
Okay.
But if someone hasn't been here with us for a while, it's 57 episodes of the podcast, they would think that me saying trade Mitch Marner is just adding to what's become an entire social movement to move Mitch Marner.
No.
I was pleading with trading Mitch Marner last year.
Yeah.
Okay. I felt that they missed the boat last offseason when the no movement clause did not kick in until July 1st, and they could have got to the draft and done something for this player, who at that time would have still had 2 years under contract. And I thought that would have been a really good time to make a statement. They didn't do that. Do I still feel the same way today? Yes. I still feel the same way today because it's not about the return as much as it is about the cultural change that is needed on this team. So if you're giving me one and only one, yes, that's my number one target that I move for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
For the Jays, we're talking the one move you would like to see before is the firing of the general manager.
Yeah. Yep. Before you can address any of the players, you need a clean house of management, and appoint someone different today who's going to bring a different philosophy in, and then let them be the but nothing can happen with the on-the-field stuff, in my opinion, unless it's a new voice at the top. That'd be needed.
And for the Raptors, what is it that would get you excited about a 2024-2025 season? Is it an acquisition of a max player who's already under contract? Is it the blockbuster trade?
Yeah.
Is it like, what is it?
I think now with the Raptors, they've passed the point where they can do a tank. I don't even know that a tank would work next year. The concept of the tank worked this year again because of the injuries. So only in a time where injuries presented themselves again, and you don't make decisions based or hoping that guys are going to get hurt. So a healthy Barnes, a healthy RJ, a healthy Emmanuel Quickly, with the other pieces they currently have, likely result in a Raptors team that will probably be in the 30-something win range next year. Maybe close to what a 500 team might be. So not a team that can tank. And I don't think there's an appetite, clearly, to tank it again. So yes, it would be the acquisition of a max-ish style player that you can add to the other three, and hope that you get something that comes together, and go at it from there. And within that comes perhaps another level to the players that you have that perhaps you're not. I don't want to say they're not forecasting, but does Scotty have another gear? Does RJ have another gear? Does Quickly have another gear? Inevitably, does Grady Dick have another gear? Right? I mean, you'd like to think that it does, right?
They better. If they don't,
well,
if they don't, you're in trouble.
But you're going to commit to this, right? You're going to extend RJ. You're going who I think he has one more season already.
Yeah, I think he's under contract for a couple more years at least.
Quickly needs to be extended.
I think RJ's under for at least 3 years.
But that's what I'm saying. But Quickly needs to be extended.
Yes.
Can you support them with another talent? About as high end as you can find it at this point, and see what happens. See if it can grow into something more.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way now because of what the Raptors have done.
and if I can just answer my own questions too, like you're absolutely right. Like, where is the NBA going? Well, the NBA is going with, athletic bigs who can shoot. General shooting. So yeah, like my hope is, when the Raptors bring somebody in, shooting's not a concern. I would like to have a hockey team that we don't talk about a porous defense. I'd like an established goalie. I'd like to get rid of some of these question marks where you have this history of how do you build teams, and we seem to be doing it the other way.
Well, listen, you weren't on.
The baseball team, I don't disagree with you. Hold on, sorry. The baseball team, I don't disagree with you that the general manager has to go, but I would like to see.
Go ahead.
I just want to see a bat. I just want to see a bat in here, and I don't care where he plays.
Yeah, well, but I don't trust this general manager to make the right call on who to acquire.
Yeah.
You were not on last week. You mentioned a goalie, so that's the reason why I'm going to ask. What is the move that you want to see the Leafs make?
He didn't have a great year, but I read this online. But a Mitch Marner to the Islanders.
Wow.
Right? So this is an established Toronto guy, right? A Leaf tweeter, working in the industry, had, Sorokin as part of what was coming back for Marner, with an extension for Marner, with an extension. Right? So, I would even want to add to that, though. I'd want Sorokin and a D.
Wow.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm not talking about a Dobson or anything like that. But, I'm talking about you've got tons of, like...
In a dream world, you're getting Sorokin and Dobson for Mitch Marner.
I'm just saying, get me a D man who could play, who's tough, who's physical.
So, but who gets the extension? Like Marner. Mitch Marner gets extended?
Marner agrees to an extension and then goes to that team.
Right, because what? Because if you trade him there, and Lou handles it, Mitch Marner's next contract is going to be 8 years times $1 because Lou's going to take him and Daddy to the bank. Mitch Marner does not need to be extended to be traded. The acquiring team still has 1 year with him under contract and would be able to extend him for 8 years.
I'm just curious if he doesn't say, if I go, I want my money now. That'll be a condition of him waiving the no move. And again, I don't know about trade speculation, stuff like that. I would just like to hear the narrative.
Sorokin.
I would like to hear the narrative that the Leafs have an established goalie and an improved defense. I just want this cap, balanced out a bit. I want the cap money, the allocation of dollars balanced out a bit better.
My concern, and we'll slowly wrap it up here. And I've said this last week. My concern with any Marner deal is because he controls the entire process here. of where he's willing to go. If he picks a team that is up near the cap, the only way a trade happens is salary in, salary out. And it's a scenario that, depending on what's coming back, like even if what comes back is popular in name, the contract that X player comes back with can still be a hindrance to how this team is built. One thing that I will lament, the perfect situation for Toronto, my opinion, would be Mitch Marner picking a destination that has a team that is not up against the cap and allows Toronto to look at a predominantly futures rich package.
Sure.
That clears up the cap space.
Sportsnet had
but you still got to make it. You still got to make good with it if you get it back, right?
Sportsnet ran an article about 4 trades the Leafs should make for Mitch Marner, right? And one of them,
I read that, and I didn't like it.
And it's like, okay, so Marner to Columbus for this year's first and Kent Johnson.
Okay.
Right, and then I guess they don't mention it in the article, but then now you've saved some money and you can perhaps take a run at like a Montour from Florida, or Brett Pesce. Is it Brett Pesce?
Yeah.
From Carolina.
Carolina,
like, okay, that's possible. Here's the thing: Mitch Marner is not going to accept a trade to Columbus.
Yeah. Not only is he not going to accept a trade to Columbus,
irresponsible. What an irresponsible article.
But it goes beyond that. Listen, I'm on social media daily. A lot of the trades that I've seen for Mitch Marner seem to include 2024 draft picks. And I have to keep repeating this because I don't think that people are listening. Mitch Marner is owed a hefty bonus on July 2nd. The NHL entry draft happens days before that. Okay? No team, no matter who it is, if Marner is willing to waive to, is going to sit there eagerly saying, oh, yeah, trade him to me before July 2nd because we'd like to pay that hefty bonus.
Yeah.
It is almost assuredly that whatever team he would pick to go to would much prefer to allow the Leafs to pay that bonus, which I think they would happily, and then trade the player, which then means you are past the 2024 entry draft. And I don't know if it's just me, but I don't recall a time in my life where a player went on stage, took the jersey of the team that just drafted him, and then was traded a week later. I don't think it's happened in NHL history. Someone would have to look it up. I don't think it's happened in NHL history.
It happens in basketball all the time. The guy puts on the hat, and then they find out in 10 minutes. Well, you're being traded in 10 minutes.
But they're
taken for another team.
In the league that is the most conservative league in the world.
Correct.
When those 12 people from that team are standing on stage and shaking hands with the guy that they just drafted between 1 and 32, that guy's not traded 5 days later, not even in the same season. Yeah. Okay? So no 2024 pick's going to come in this Marner deal. So when we talk about futures, we're talking about kids that have already been drafted. We're talking about maybe picks in 2025, which is fine. Because if you look at the Leafs draft picks for the 2025 season, they don't have any. So it would be good to stock that bench.
I'll tell you, though, again, tying all these teams together, I'd love to see a Jakob Poeltl trade.
Well, and yes, and in tying all these teams together, out of the three of them, there is one of them whose window you feel is closed today, the Leafs, that can reopen rather quickly because there's actually something in the tank that didn't happen early on in the Matthews, Nylander, Marner era. But now you've got three guys that people are talking about. One that people are raving about because of what he did in the OHL this season and subsequently in the OHL playoffs. The Leafs may have stolen one late last year in Easton Cowan.
Yeah.
And the trio of Nyes, Cowan, and Minton may allow a new window to open in short order here in Toronto as long as they rebalance this properly this offseason.
Correct.
They've got to hit home runs this offseason. They have to hit home runs, unquestionably. So,
because then you're supplementing what you lose in offensive production with some cheap contracts.
And that's the most important part in the NHL. If you can get production from guys that are making $900 a year.
Who won the Conn Smythe last year?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Marchessault, he makes $5 million.
Well, but take a look at Dallas right now. You know, who's breaking them out? Who's breaking out in the playoffs? Wyatt Johnson.
Wyatt Johnson.
So this stuff happens. You know, when Colorado wins the cup, Cale Makar is still on his entry level, right? The addition of Cale Makar enhanced the timeline with what turned out to be the veteran players there in McKinnon and Landeskog and whoever else they had when they won the cup that year. So it's relevant in hockey. You know, it's a long way of saying that it's relevant in hockey. Listen, let's wrap it up there. To our listeners on YouTube, smash the like button, subscribe if you will, leave a comment on the podcast. We'd love to hear from you, even if it's negative, because then we can come on the next week and I can chew your ass right here live. One more. For those of us listening on podcast, I say all the time because you can't bear to see our faces. We appreciate you too. Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, whatever. Or all the popular streaming platforms, you can find the Six Sports Podcast. I want to finish this week on a little bit of a somber note, if you will. My teen years, highly impressionable, growing up watching TSN highlights. I think it's something that we all did. This morning, an announcement was made by TSN that Darren DeChisholm, Dutchie, if we just want to give his last name, passed away. And it's really sad. And I grew up watching Dutchie. Like that was the guy on my highlight package whenever I'd be watching the TSN highlights. So though it's unlikely that anyone in his family is watching, condolences to the Dutchie family, and may he rest in peace.
Well said. Yeah. Nothing more required.
Nothing more required. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll catch up with you on the next episode. Have a good day, everybody.
Ciao.